Cybercriminals are using social engineering loaded with urgency and fear to successfully prey on victims, your employees, or your customers. Protect your Office 365 email from today's most sophisticated attacks with Barracuda Email Threat Scanner. It's a free tool to help protect your business from these hard-to-detect attacks. The Barracuda Email Threat Scanner uses artificial intelligence to hunt and eliminate Office 365 email threats. Find the cybersecurity threats hiding in your Office 365 email right now. Get your free email threat scan at securityweekly.com/Barracuda. We're proud to announce CISO Stories, a new podcast series in partnership with Cybersecurity Collaborative and Cyber Reason. CISO Stories features the candid perspectives and experiences of frontline senior security executives and dives deep into timely security topics. CISO Stories is hosted by Todd Fitzgerald, VP of Cybersecurity Strategy at Cybersecurity Collaborative, and Sam Curry, Chief Product and Security Officer at Cyber Reason. Listen weekly as they speak with extraordinary CISOs by visiting securityweekly.com/CSP.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Paul Asadorian and Jason Albuquerque. Security Weekly is excited to announce that we will be at InfoSec World 2021 in person. Yes, I said in person, October 25th to 27th, 2021. This year, our annual partnership with InfoSec World is extra special as we are both business units under the Cyber Risk Alliance brand. What does that mean for Security Weekly listeners and InfoSec World attendees? You will get to see and hear from many of the Security Weekly team at the event and will also save 20% off your World Pass. Visit securityweekly.com/ISW 2021 to register using our discount code. Do you have a specific guest or topic that you want us to cover on one of the shows? Submit your suggestions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests and completing the form. We review suggestions monthly and will reach out to you once reviewed. All right, Jason, I put some good articles in here this week. The first one, CISO struggle to cope with mounting job stress. This came up in our interview last week with Jonathan on Tuesday night. He brought up one of the stats about CISO, like 1 in 6 or 1 in 8 CISOs medicates using alcohol or something like that. And this article popped up, and I'm like, oh, we got to cover this one.
We have to talk about that. Yeah,
and the other 7 are lying? Is that?
No, they're just medicating with other voices.
With something else. Right. Be specific about what you're
right. So first I have to say, is it crazy that I got a chill, Matt, when you said, and we will be there live? It was like, holy crap, you're going to be in person?
Right.
Crazy. Crazy
awesome.
talk.
Crazy. It's a good feeling. It's a good feeling. But you want to know what? The article, it makes sense. Think about, and it's not just the CISOs, honestly. I mean, obviously that's a focus of our topic here. But C-level executives across the business are feeling more pressure because, over the course of the last year and a half or so, businesses have been trying to innovate as fast as they can for obvious reasons. They fast forwarded their digital transformation activities and started really pushing heavy on IT projects and leveraging IT to be a differentiator. And I kind of call it cabin fever. We've all been stuck in cabin fever, right? So yeah, the stress levels are high, right? And honestly, I read this article and I'll say it again. I've said it before. Number one priority is we have to be taking care of ourselves before we can take care of the business and our staff, our employees, and our customers. We have to be taking care of ourselves. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to be in the mindset, to be on, to be sharp, right? So, coming out of this, find your way to alleviate stress, whether it's exercise or, hanging out with your friends now that we can actually start having more social activity. Take care of yourself. Whatever it is that makes you happy, go do it. Take the time.
Last week was a great, event for me, right? I haven't been in studio in 9 months. We haven't been together as a team in 9 months. I mean, it was great to get back into studio and work with the team. Look, there was not a lot of stress last week. I mean, considering we did 33 interviews in 4 days, we produced 4 executive shows in the evening, we work 4 12-plus hour days. but stress levels weren't that high because we were just all there working together, getting stuff done, having a good time. I thought it was a great kind of, for me, a good recharge because, man, you're right. You get cabin fever sitting here,
So
at
bad.
home all
But
the time.
I think there's two things you both just highlighted which are important and tie into our discussion of like, will people work from home? You didn't have cabin fever anymore by coming in the office, and you were able to collaborate at a level that actually reduced stress. Those two are huge things. Why I think everyone's like, I was been working from home forever. I don't know. Go back to those two things. I think that's.
You know what? I'll literally put it to this level where it was something that happened that immediately I felt, the stress level kind of start to dissipate. Walked in the door to the studio, and the first thing we all did was gave each other hugs because we could.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, that one thing, we saw each other, we gave each other hugs, we gave high fives, so nice to see you. That 5-minute cycle of what we did, I could feel the level of happiness and maybe dopamine or whatever was happening in my body, but it changed the attitude of what was going on in there. And the shows last week were incredible. We had a great time. And you're right. There was zero stress. It was just awesome, right?
Well, because I think
simple as a hug did it, hugging the crew.
But also, I agree with that. But I also think you're not waiting on someone to have a Zoom meeting or a Slack chat or an email, and that waiting breeds stress. And I think we at Security Weekly certainly that's really close to home for us because look at the number of hosts and guests that are appearing on our show every week. And that waiting breeds a lot of stress. When we can all be in the same room, it alleviates a lot of that excess communications and waiting.
And it's not just the waiting, Paul. To me, it's the back to back to back to back to back to back throughout the day.
Yes.
It creates a stress because you're constantly jumping from a Teams call to a Zoom meeting to 3 more consecutive Teams calls. That also puts a lot of stress on the organization and the leadership teams.
Hey, that's a great point, Matt. A while back, we all made a commitment to each other as leaders and colleagues that we wouldn't make 1-hour meetings back to back. We'd do 40-minute meetings, 45-minute meetings, so everybody got a breath in between.
This next article, 8 things CISOs should be thinking about, but probably aren't. I bet some of these are actually being covered, but I thought it was an interesting list to review nonetheless.
Yeah, no, it's a great list. I pulled some of the items that are kind of close to home for me out of this article. Investing in innovation opportunities. If you talk to any folks who've ever worked for me in the past, been on my teams, I force innovation time into calendars. You have to do it. Right. Otherwise, you just get stuck in that. We talked about it earlier, the run, they keep the lights on. And that's not how you're bringing innovation and becoming relevant within your organization. Right. And showing that, you're adding business value. You have to innovate. You have to put time on people's calendars to learn new technologies, help with automation and orchestration, like we talked about before, and really focus on that growth and transformation. So that's one that stuck out big time for me.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk around supply chain and third-party vendor management and having to run a program, ensuring that third-party partners maintain strong security. That's not an easy task. Not in the light of how we've done third-party vendor management and in the light of all these attacks. Sure. That is not easy.
No, it's not. And it's all hands on deck when it comes to that. It's a combination of business units who have to work on that, right? Everything from financial due diligence from our finance team to your vendor management team, doing the integration due diligence, the security team doing the security and compliance type. It's a shared responsibility. I say it all the time, but that's one place where a security team cannot do it by themselves. There's way too much involved.
Yeah, agreed. Let's see this next one: corporate compliance strategies to protect data. This started off, I thought, as a pretty good article. We've covered a lot of these topics, though, right? Cross-functional team approaches and operational strategies, focusing. I think the interesting one that came out was trade secrets audits, which you was like, wait a minute, how many people do that? Like, do they actually do that? Because I've never done that.
I don't know if organizations actually do that, but it's it's something to kind of keep in mind, protecting your intellectual property, right? And we talked about it in the interview segment that you have to have those relationships across the business, and building that is really the only way that you're going to be successful. Because if you're doing it in a silo, you're going to miss a lot, right? Because the HR team, the legal team, the services team, they're going to know where some of those skeletons are hidden and that you can't find. So whether it be process or data or whatever the case may be, vendors that they're bringing into the organization, right? We just talked about vendor risk management. You have to have that level of insight, and really it's that strategy across business units that's going to do it.
Yeah, I mean, you even had conversations last week around the challenges of data discovery, data classification. This is a struggle, right? And if you're doing it in silos, there's no way you're going to get your arms around where all that data is and how to protect it holistically.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, step number one is just build the relationships across the entire business.
Yeah. Fourth article, cybersecurity metrics that matter. So Wendy Nather, who is a good friend of the show, Wade Baker, presented at RSA conference last week. There's a short interview of her. We didn't get an opportunity to interview her last week, but I summarized some of the takeaways out of here. So what they did is they did a research study. They looked at two pieces. They looked at 25 security practices and 11 outcomes, but they didn't try to tie them together. They wanted them separate, and they wanted to see if there was causality between the practices and the outcomes. And there were some very interesting findings that I wanted to highlight here. Best practices and improved security outcomes the most, proactive technology refresh, which we talked about last week.
Isn't that what I was just saying?
Yeah,
the past couple of weeks I've been saying that.
Yep.
And I swear I didn't talk to Wade or Wendy. So
Yep. So proactive technology refresh, keeping on top of the latest and greatest technologies, is a very positive outcome from a security perspective. Number two is integrating those technology stacks together, which is, again, we
talk about that too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of siloed products, an ecosystem that you can get context across the entire business, right?
Exactly
we talk about
right.
All the time.
And so when you think about 25 practices, and I didn't look at the whole list, technology refresh and technology integration are the two that have the biggest impact on security outcomes. Just something for CISOs and executive teams take away. Look, if we stay on top of technology and we continue to improve our integration, we're going to be better off from a security perspective. I thought that was a very interesting finding.
I'd add better off from a business perspective as well.
Of course.
Absolutely. Yeah.
100%. Yep. And that's where security comes in. The security team comes into play to be that business partner for the business, right? Because you can come in and say, not only are we refreshing the technology and how it's going to improve our posture, but here's how it's going to help the business as well, because you understand that technology and you understand what that new technology is going to bring to the table.
Yeah. The other thing that I just loved out of this was compliance and name only is not enough, which means just because you name somebody that's in charge of compliance, it doesn't mean it impacts your security outcome. We've been saying this for 15 plus years.
Right. If the philosophy is check the box, of course it's not going to work. We know that.
Yep. Yeah. And then when it got to metrics that matter, she said they're really tied to two things: outcomes and the capabilities of each organization. There is no silver bullet here. It is a combination of what are your outcomes and what capabilities do you have or capabilities do you need that will drive the right metrics for your organization. And I think that's because I think a lot of people look to metrics as like, just give me the list and I'll just duplicate it, but it's not it's not that simple.
No, every business is different. I mean, I've worked for multiple IT services organizations, multiple MSPs, and none are the same. The cultures are different. The processes are different. The leadership styles are different. The technologies are different. It's like a fingerprint. You can't. There's no one the same.
Yeah, and I think her matrix of the 25 practices and the 11 outcomes might be an interesting model for other organizations to kind of look at which practices are doing, what outcomes are desired, do they have the right capabilities to deliver. That could set a template for what types of metrics an organization should look at.
I agree.
That's what I took. Okay, article number 5. I had to throw this one in here. Security by design, a new model for cloud cyber.
Oh, a new model.
What?
A new model. Come on, man.
We've been talking about security by design for at least 10 years and probably longer.
God, yeah. I mean, we've been talking about that since day one that I started co-hosting this podcast. And teams have been talking about it for, 8 years prior, right? Shifting left, getting security embedded as early as they possibly can. But is it wrong that it needs to be there? No, it needs to be there, but it's not new. This is not new.
No, it's not new at all. And I think it's interesting how we take concepts that have been around for a while, and then they kind of lost focus. And you're like, hey, here's a new approach. No, that's an old approach. It didn't work 10 years ago. So what do we do? My question is, what do we do differently to try to get to a security by design?
Yeah, why are we still talking about this as a new approach?
Yeah, this should just be be the approach. And as we established previously, you should be innovating, refreshing technology, and do that with security experts that, as Jason always says, right, have a seat at the table, instill that culture, so that when you do something new, that you take security into that design. And look, a well-designed, whatever you're designing, if it's well-designed, is going to account for security vulnerabilities and exposures, right?
Yeah, and for folks who are looking for that seat at the table or have it, it's all about just the security leader having the influence and the ability to make change, the authority to make change, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what's going to make things happen. You need to be empowered to have the authority to work with business unit leaders and say, we need to be going down this. How can I partner with you to get us to this outcome?
Yep. There's a couple points in here that I wanted to highlight. Reducing risk related to technology, to Paul's point, technology refresh, integration, insider threats, and supply chain. Back to the supply chain third-party conversation, right? To me, that is near the top. He's got it second in this list, and I don't know if this was supposed to be ordered or not. But to me, that is a huge component. Like, how do I reduce my risk across those 3 areas before I go into some of these other steps? Supporting developers and engineers while enabling the business with development, security, and operation. This is the whole promise behind shifting left and DevSecOps. We talk a lot about that on Application Security Weekly and some of this on ESW, but definitely components there. And then I can look at leading edge innovation or other approaches to continue to reduce that risk. But those first 2 to me are just a little more important higher up the stack before I go down some of these other paths.
Let's think about this for a second, Matt and Paul. Why? Because they're not within our grasp of an IT fix, right? Because dealing with supply chain, you need to interface with a lot more business units than just the IT team or the security team. You have to, right? Insider threat, that goes across every single business unit within your organization. You have to have a relationship and some level of authority there. Reducing risk related to technology, if you don't have the authority, guess what? That end-of-life system, you're not replacing it. Simply because the security team said so? Well, guess what? It runs my business. That's what you're going to get. We won't drive revenue if we have any outage here. That's what you'll get. So this is where having the authority and the influence matters, because these are items that are not in our grasp. They're not IT, they're not security, they're outside business units that you have to interface with to make that happen.
Yeah. Back to our collaboration and communication and leadership discussions that we have on a lot of these shows. Yes. Last article for this week. I could have added a bunch more in here. 4 ways to handle the cybersecurity skill shortage in 2021. We talk about these in various places all over the place, but I thought this was a really good summary of things we have to think about, right? Sure. Because number 1, we got to keep the talent we have, because that just creates more of a skill gap. Right. And so,
you're just playing musical chairs, right? At the end of the day, you're playing musical chairs with the talent that exists. So If you're not nurturing the talent that you have, they're going to get up and move somewhere else. And musical chairs isn't going to fix the problem.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, we're going to have that problem until we fix the way people get into this field and mature that model. I mean, that's really, we can talk till blue in the face about the skills shortage. It's not going to change until people have a perception and understanding of what this field is and get into it like they do many other fields, such as if you want to be a lawyer, a teacher, a doctor, whatever it is.
100%.
Right? Those professions are so much more mature. And that shows in the way they've garnered interest into people getting into them. And we lack in several areas against a lot of those professions.
And you know, I say this all the time, Paul, because this is a huge passion of mine. Until we, who are the professionals, put our skin in the game and help those organizations identify and build security talent, it's not going to happen. We need to be more involved in K through 12 education, influencing that. We need to be more involved in higher ed and making sure that their curriculum can make people workforce ready as soon as they get out of the university. We need to be working with departments of labor and training and saying, hey, you may have people who have an aptitude who can get into this field who are not employed right now. How do we build programs to educate them? We need to be handling that. That's how we build the pipeline, right? And that's how we stop the bleeding.
Yeah, and then we get HR on board to stop creating these requirements for some of these positions that are just unrealistic, which is point number 4, which is kind of my hot button topic here, because that is the one that I think limits bringing in people from other fields and other areas into our industry, is because the HR requirements are just not right for the job role or position.
They're absolutely wrong. They limit people with the right attitude and aptitude to get into the field. They stop them from being able to get into the field, which again is that piece for what I'll call the disenfranchised workforce. Maybe they lost their job. Maybe they're looking for a new career. Those folks can't get into cybersecurity because of all these HR limitations. We need to be changing that. Absolutely.
Because there needs to be structure at the entry level positions and grooming people at the entry level positions.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you have to have the ability to bring someone in and create maybe like an apprenticeship program, right? We've talked about that, right? And that way you're building a bench.
Look at how structured it is in the medical field. When you want to become a doctor, or really a lot of positions in there is a structured path. You just don't walk into those positions until you've walked the path of, in like doctor, right? Certain type of schooling, certain type of a fellowship program. It's very, very structured.
Right.
Yeah. And if you can recruit into those early positions, you invest in training, and you find really good incentive models, you can start to build that path without a formal, official, like industry path. Organizations could build aspects of this themselves to really enable those positions to come in, get trained, and kind of grow.
I mean, the hospitals run the resident programs for doctors. I feel like we need something similar in cybersecurity.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's, obviously we're a little bit more spread out and disparate, right? I mean, you go into a hospital system, obviously that's their revenue generating, right? That's their service, right? In many instances, cybersecurity isn't the service of the organization. So I can see why hospitals will be investing, because that's how they make money, right? Because they have to have the medical professionals. But you're absolutely right. Cybersecurity leaders should be modeling programs like that, where they're developing talent internally, and they bring them in and they can develop them, and then they have a progression, so that way they're keeping and retaining the talent.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a challenge in the industry. Let's hope we can continue to improve it. Gentlemen, a pleasure as always. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Next week is Memorial Day, so we'll see you in 2 weeks on Business Security Weekly.